afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. We are in our illumination of the intent class, and we're going to begin with a couple of prayers, and then we'll do a little meditation before we begin the actual discourse. So, what is it? Mary Ellen, would you like to put up the prayers? Okay. Sangye Churang Suki Chognam La Jangju Badu Dami Kapsu Chi Dagi Chunengi Pesonam Ki Rola Penshi Sangye Rupa Sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrating beings. And then next slide. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay. So we're going to begin with a little meditation. Try to set our motivation and develop a calm, clear mind for listening to the teaching. So sit comfortably with your spine straight. Relax your body. Relax your mind. One feature of which I like to think of is means remind yourself you don't have to think of anything else other than what we're meditating on right now. And begin by placing your attention, your mindfulness afterwards on the breathing, the respiration. Your wisdom simply noting when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. Watch it continually and in detail so that no other thoughts enter into your mind. having slightly calmed your mind by watching the respiration. Now turn your attention instead to the mental consciousness. That is, give up paying attention to your breathing. Just watch your mind, your mental consciousness, not your eyes, ears, no sense of smell, taste, or touch. But that which is going through your mind. And try to recognize or recall that any thoughts or emotions that might be arising are, in a sense, like clouds in an otherwise clear sky. The sky here is the spaciousness of your mind, the clear light nature, conventional clear light nature. The clouds are like the thoughts or emotional states, anger, attachment, judgment, frustration, even the appearance of pain. All are just appearances within the clear light nature of your mind. If you have meditated like this before, see if you can recall, bring back a remembering consciousness of this clear light nature, like a vast space or sky. That is perceived by your wisdom eye, not your physical eye. That is merely the absence of any obstruction of the conventional mind. Thoughts, cloud-like thoughts can arise without any obstruction. They can leave without any obstruction. They're not hindered. When you get angry or you're frustrated or you're thinking of oneself, by simply shifting your attention away from those thoughts, they can begin to dissipate, disappear from your mind, and you can be left again in a non-conceptualizing state. That is to say, there's no thinking going on, still conceptual in the sense that you have a mental image of the spaciousness of the mind. See if you can hold on to that space-like appearance with some continuity of concentration. If you get distracted, recognize that the distraction itself is an appearance within this clear light nature of your mind. Let go of the appearance of the thoughts or feelings and refocus on the spaciousness of the mind. This conventional clear light nature of our own mind is called the developmental Buddha nature, as opposed to the ultimate Buddha nature, which is the emptiness of our mind. Here we're just looking at the conventional nature of our mind. The fact that it lacks any obstruction to the arisal of thoughts, any obstruction to their removal. The fact that we have this nature indicates that we can develop all of the great thoughts of the Mahayana path, all the great accomplishments, wisdom, compassion, renunciation. And we can get rid of all of our, up till now, faults, our attachment, our longing, our desires, our anger, irritation, hatred, our closed-mindedness, even our ignorance. We can replace it with wisdom. We can reprogram the solid state drive of our mind, reboot. This ability to recognize this, we always have this, all beings have this conventional clear light nature, and also all beings have the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, but are unaware of it, most of them. The fact that we can be aware of this now is due to the fact that we, at this moment, have a life of leisure and endowment. The Buddha called a special juncture of the ripening of karma from past lives where we're a human being. We have faith in the teachings. We are not encumbered by strong obstacles like being born in a country where the teachings do not exist. We have the support of benefactors, Dharma friends. The Dharma that Buddha Shakyamuni Buddha taught still exists in realizable form. There are teachers and practitioners who have tread that path and have made some degree of realization of it that can transmit it to us. This is a very rare situation, the Buddha taught, to have this synchronicity of factors coming together, more rare than even meeting the Dharma, the fact that we have all of these other factors, freedom from obstacles and so forth. But it is impermanent, disintegrating moment by moment. We will eventually, without choice, die unless we achieve enlightenment beforehand. But we spend most of our time obsessed with the appearances of this life, our day-to-day traumas and dramas. We have left ourselves very little time to practice the Dharma. So recognizing this, try to make a strong aspiration that I am going to participate in the talk this morning, today, with an eye to achieve enlightenment, not just for ourselves, but out of compassion for all beings. In one sense, who've all been our mother and depthlessly kind, numberless lives, sentient beings who are exactly equal with us in wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to be happy. And on the basis of that equality, recognizing that I don't have to identify only with the events of my own personal life, but I can identify with the situation of all living beings. I can rename myself to the entirety of sentient beings. And recognizing the situation that they're in, buffeted by karma and delusion, especially the grasping to a self-identity that doesn't exist the way that it appears to our mind. I think I'm going to listen and participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment. The only way that I can really benefit all of these beings in an ultimate way in order to achieve that state, I have to accumulate the two collections, merit and wisdom. And one of the ways of doing that is by listening to the teachings, contemplating, meditating on them. So with that aim of achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, based on this compassion, great compassion, I'm going to participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Try to set a strong motivation like that. And bringing your attention back to the present. So, good to see you. Does anyone have any questions left over from last time, or
Mary Carter has her hand raised.
Yes, Mary. I didn't see. Okay, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
And is the phrase "the essence of the vast and the profound" a euphemism for emptiness?
Say that again.
The essence of the vast and the profound, a euphemism for emptiness. I was reading the text and that phrase came up and I wasn't sure exactly what it meant.
Okay, so just for future reference, maybe make sure that your microphone is a little closer to your when you're speaking. I couldn't catch everything. So you're asking about the word profound as kind of indicating emptiness?
I was reading in the text and the phrase "the essence of the vast and the profound" came up in the text, and I was just wondering if that was a euphemism for emptiness.
Okay, so generally speaking, there are two aspects of the path from the point of view of Buddhism, what we call the method side and what we call the wisdom side. So the method side is what is called the vast or extensive. And the wisdom side is what is called the profound. So the profound or the wisdom side, of course, we have ordinary wisdom, everyday wisdom that deals with events here and now. But the wisdom side mainly is talking about the wisdom of ultimate truth, the wisdom that realizes ultimate truth, the emptiness of inherent nature of all phenomena. The method side, and I use my right hand for that because in Buddhism, generally we associate method with the right as opposed to left, not right as opposed to wrong. And we associate wisdom with the left. Also, wisdom associated with the female aspect, method associated with the male, a little bit different than in some Indian traditions that are associated in a different way. So when we talk about the all of the practices can be included in these two, the profound and the extensive, or another way of saying extensive, vast. We're talking about all of the practices are included in method and wisdom, method that deals with ordinary conventional appearances, the supreme methods being bodhicitta, and maybe in Tantra, illusory body and things like that, and the supreme wisdom being the wisdom of emptiness. Okay? Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So good to see you. Oh, Jennifer has another question. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, and happy
Yeah.
birthday. I think you've maybe touched upon this in the meditation, but if I recall correctly, last week you had said it's not like we're already Buddhas. That's not what Buddha nature refers to. And then I was listening to the audiobook, The Heart of Meditation by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it's really focused on, I guess, awareness, right, as the starting point. And he said, in a sense, we're already Buddhas. And so I'm just wondering if you could kindly just help me understand the different perspectives. Yeah.
So generally speaking, in the especially in the Gelugpa tradition, we say, for instance, there are allusions to this fact that we are already Buddha, but we don't already know it, or something like that, in the some very famous teachings. One, for instance, the Uttara Tantra, which was composed by Maitreya, right? One of the 5 texts of Maitreya, and makes the analogy talking about Buddha nature like this. But it's understood in general. What that means is that we have the potential to become Buddha. We have both the conventional clear light nature of our minds. That means that our minds can be developed into the state of Buddhahood, what we were meditating on before, the conventional clear light nature of the mind, that it doesn't obstruct the arisal of or dispersal of thoughts. And we have the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, which is the fact that the mind is empty of inherent existence. Those 2 factors indicate that we can become a Buddha. We have the potential to become a Buddha. So sometimes what's meant by saying that we're already Buddha, some Kagyu teachers say, always recognize that you're already Buddha. What the Gelugpa would say is that that's meaning always recognize that you have the clear light nature of the mind, whatever you do, whatever problems arise, always recognize that they are not ultimately problems and so forth, that they can be overcome. Generally speaking, if you go back and look at the context of the teaching, I'm not sure who translated. Was it Thupten Jinpa who translated the book that you're reading?
I would need to double check. I don't think so.
Doesn't matter. Generally, Gelugpa would not, in the Gelugpa tradition, His Holiness has even given teachings about this, joking that that we are not already Buddhas, because if we were already Buddha, what a sad state of affairs it would be that we have delusions and problems, and we get addicted to Coca-Cola or something worse, or that we get angry. So that's generally what's meant by that. When the Uttara Tantra is explained, and these various examples, I can't remember whether there are 9 examples of Buddha nature, like a golden statue of Buddha encrusted by mud. That's kind of like our situation, as though we are already a golden Buddha, a full Buddha, but we don't realize it because of the obstructions. So it just depends on how you look at it. Generally speaking, you can't really hold the position that we are already Buddha, right? What that's indicating is that we have the potential at this moment to become Buddha. And if we focus on that, we can become Buddha. It's called training or purifying the Buddha nature. So in one sense, you might say Buddha nature is already pure. It's the emptiness of the mind, or the conventional clear light nature of the mind. But purifying it means removing the obstructions to realizing it. Once you realize that Buddha nature, you realize the emptiness of the mind, and you continue meditating on that, on the path of seeing and the path of meditation, you can eventually become a Buddha. So I think that's generally what's meant. Okay.
Thank you. And I think he was referring to like the Nyingma schools, and he was more talking about it from the recognition of pristine awareness as the starting point, and then developing that recognition of pristine awareness. So I think he was also maybe using a different method, but
So in Nyingma and Kagyu, they sometimes use that analogy. I'm not sure if generally in their final analysis, I think they would agree that you are not already Buddha. But it is, in a sense, sometimes it's kind of like a didactic method. Like say, if you realize the conventional clear light nature of the mind, some Kagyu lamas, maybe some Nyingma lamas are saying, you've realized emptiness. That's not really emptiness. That's just the conventional clear light nature of the mind. But it appears as a vacuity to the mind, right? That there's nothing obstructing you. So yeah, it's worth some more investigation, but I think that's generally the presentation of that.
thank you.
So there's a note from Dani saying she can barely read it. What is this? Okay, there's a lot of notes.
Sorry, I put a link to Uttara Tantra, but it's in Sanskrit, so sorry about that. And I can barely read it. I can
That may
read
not
it.
be, yeah,
Sorry,
that may
sorry.
not be so useful. So by the way, I'm not sure. I think Mary Ellen will put up again in the chat the schedule for the coming weeks. And if you have any strong disagreements with it, let me know. It's still fluid, but hopefully we'll have we'll have class next week, and then the first 3 weeks of August we'll have off. We'll start again the 4th week of August, and the 4th Saturday of August, or the final Saturday of August, I'm not sure. And then also the first Saturday of September, which were originally at Snehi's suggestion, we were going to have off, but that would have been like a 5-week break. So we'll have a 3-week break after next week. We'll have class next week. We'll have a 3-week break. We'll have 8 classes in a row. We'll have a 1-week break, and then 8 more classes in a row before Christmas. So take a look in the chat if you hadn't seen it before. Okay. So last time, correct me if I'm wrong, we got up to the section called How Compassion is Also the Root of the other two causes of bodhisattvas. Is that right? Hedren, is that right? You're nodding? Okay. Okay. Doris says, okay. So as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment, I will praise compassion at the start. So this is a verse from the Madhyamaka Vatara, the Karikas, the verses that Chandrakirti wrote. And Chandrakirti also wrote his commentary to that. What we have in our text, the Illumination, is Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation both of the root verses and his commentary on sort of synthesizing Chandrakirti's commentary. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, since compassion is the root of the awakening mind, the root of bodhicitta, right? When we say compassion, that means great compassion, and is the root of non-dual awareness as well. So how can that be? How can it be the root of non-dual awareness? Non-dual awareness means realization of emptiness, right? So how can compassion be the root of realization of emptiness? What do you think, Stephen? Stating it as a fact.
Yeah. Thank you, Venerable George. Well, I think that I think it can give you the determination to pursue your study of emptiness. In that way, it can be the root of non-dual awareness.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Yeah. So also, if compassion, when we say it's the root of bodhicitta, you can have compassion, and here when he says compassion, he means great compassion. It's kind of the motivating factor for you to investigate emptiness and so forth. So it's the root of both bodhicitta and the realization of emptiness when he says non-dual awareness. Chandrakirti wrote, as and so forth and so on, with the intention of showing how compassion is primary among these three factors. So that's referring back to that root verse, chapter, what he calls 1-2, right above that. As compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest. And then in the commentaries, Lama Tsongkhapa says is the root of these. So as compassion alone is crucially important in the beginning, to help produce the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, it is like the seed. So that's making an analogy of, a seed giving rise to a sprout, which will eventually ripen in maybe a medicinal tree that's beneficial and so forth. Doris, I'll get to you in a second. Let me just read this first. As compassion alone is crucially important in the beginning to help produce the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, it is like the seed. It is important to nourish the plant to even higher states in the middle, after one has already developed the sprout. And it is like the water finally as a source of enjoyment by the trainees for a long time. It is accepted as resembling the ripened fruit. Did I get that right? It is crucially important in the beginning to help produce the perfect harvest of Buddhahood. It is like the seed. To nourish the plant to even higher states in the middle, it is like water. Okay, water is like the middle. Finally, as a source of enjoyment by the trainees for a long time, it is accepted as resembling the ripened fruit. Therefore, I, Chandrakirti, this is quoting, paraphrasing Chandrakirti, I, Chandrakirti, will praise compassion as opposed to praising the Shravakas, the hearers, and the Pratika Buddhas, the solitary realizers, or even the Bodhisattvas, or the other two causes, meaning non-dual awareness and bodhicitta at the start of composing this treatise. So at the beginning, he praises great compassion because it's the cause of the other two causes of the, or the root of them, the causes of bodhisattvas, which in turn give birth to the Buddhas, which in turn give birth to the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. So sort of praising bodhicitta, praising great compassion is like praising all of them. Doris, you have a thought?
Yes, thank you, Venerable. I don't want to go too far before I get confused.
Okay.
So non-dual truth, I thought, was freedom from the extremes. You're saying non-dual awareness, that's realization of emptiness. So
Where did you see the expression non-dual truth?
that's in that, oh, I had to go back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Usually we're
in,
talking about non-dual awareness, right?
it says in my page, sorry, it's the compassionate mind, which will be explained below, the wisdom of cognition that realizes non-dual truth, or freedom from the dichotomy of extremes of thingness and non-thingness. So it's
Okay.
that statement.
Okay.
So
So it's talking about the wisdom of non-duality. I think Thupten Jinpa's added the word truth to that. So it's the wisdom of non-duality. That means the wisdom that sees the middle way, sees that things are empty of inherent existence, which is between the extreme of holding things to be really existent, truly existent or inherently existent, and the extreme of thinking that because they're empty, they don't exist at all. So that's what's called the middle way when we talk about, the view of the Buddha. The middle way, sometimes in very basic sense, people think middle way means, not going too far, not being too ascetic, and not being too, indulgent of all of the enjoyments of samsara. Like the Buddha, when he lived as a prince, had all of the enjoyments, he gave that up. Then he spent 6 years in meditation, ascetic meditation, surviving on just a little berry a day and so forth, gave that up in the end, settled on a middle way. So that's kind of analogy. When we talk about the middle way in philosophy, we talk about the view that sees the correct view that sees phenomena as empty of inherent existence, between the extremes of holding things to be inherently existent and holding them to be non-existent at all. So the crucial word there, Doris, was wisdom, when he said non-dual truth. So I think it's the wisdom of non-duality is what the text actually said. Rachel, you have a question.
may I follow up,
Yeah.
Venerable? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
But that doesn't sound like a realization of emptiness, which is what we're talking about now, according to how you're saying it.
The wisdom of non-duality.
Right. I got
Okay.
that. But why is this a realization now? Why has it become a realization?
Well, if you're talking about wisdom, it's understanding something, right?
Gotcha.
Okay. I can't see where your face is on. Oh, there you are. So it's an understanding, or you can say that wisdom is a, that wisdom, usually if you just have a belief that phenomena are empty of inherent existence, that doesn't constitute a realization.
Gotcha.
Even if you have sorry.
That's where I'm mixed up. It's not, but we're talking about a realization now.
Yeah. Generally, if you have a wisdom consciousness, usually we say the wisdom that realizes emptiness, right? So you can have wisdom to certain kind of wisdom that discriminates. You could even have a correct assumption or belief, correct belief, which is kind of like a wisdom consciousness, but that's not what's constituted here. We talk about the wisdom that realizes emptiness. That's what's being indicated here when we say the wisdom of, or when we say non-dual awareness. That awareness is referring to a wisdom consciousness that realizes non-duality, that realizes that phenomena are empty of inherent existence. That's still opaque?
The way that you just said it made perfect sense to me. So
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, one has to be careful when we're talking about here non-dual awareness. You have to look at what is being referred to. It doesn't just mean sort of like being aware of something, like you hear the dog over in the corner, you're aware of the dog. It means actually realizing emptiness. That becomes one of the causes of the bodhisattva when we talk about those bodhisattvas of sharp faculties. Rachel, you have a thought.
Happy birthday.
Okay, thank you.
So in this phrase, in this verse where it's saying the seed becomes bodhicitta, the seed of compassion becomes bodhicitta, and the water of compassion nourishes even higher states, sort of similar to what Stephen was saying earlier, where it's motivating us to keep going. How is compassion a source of enjoyment? What is the fruit? How does that, can you explain a little bit more about how?
Yeah, well, it's coming, but I'll give a prelude. That's why it's good to read ahead, so you know what is all of these are explained. Right now, it's sort of just going over in general. So what it means is if one were to become a Buddha due to these practices, if one lacked great compassion, you would not be a source of continued enjoyment by sentient beings. That is, that sentient beings would not be able to enjoy the teachings, overcoming their delusions, developing good qualities, and so forth. So, well, we'll see. We'll see in in the coming paragraphs here when it's talking about the fruit. In essence, there couldn't be a Buddha there could not be a Buddha who was devoid of great compassion. It's just making a hypothetical. If you became Buddha and you lacked great compassion, you wouldn't be able to be a source of happiness for sentient beings, for their enjoyment. You wouldn't be able to present the enjoyment body or the what was called the emanation body, the Nirmanakaya. You wouldn't be able to emanate the Sambhogakaya or the Nirmanakaya. The Sambhogakaya is a source of enjoyment of the bodhisattvas and so forth. Okay, is that good enough for right now? Okay. Okay, so as compassion alone is crucially important in the beginning to help produce the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, it is like the seed. So great compassion is like the seed. It is like water in the middle to nourish the sprout that has been created. So in the middle, once one is on the learning paths, so we talk about before entering the path, it's kind of like the seed, right? Before entering the path, because in our analogy here in Chandrakirti's presentation, when he said, great compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta are the causes of the bodhisattvas. That's referring to to the period before entering into the Mahayana path. So you're not on the learner's path yet. So the second section, when it says nourishing, is like when you're on the learner's path. Great compassion is what continues to give you impetus to make higher and higher realizations. And in the end, it is like it's like the fruit. That is the ability of the Buddha to emanate these various bodies and teach and bless sentient beings and so forth. So for those reasons, Chandrakirti chose to praise great compassion at the beginning rather than anything else. They're very, very profound and well studied and well accepted by people, that this is a very unique kind of presentation of Chandrakirti at the beginning. It's not something that's stated in Fundamental Wisdom by Nagarjuna, mainly talking about wisdom. Here Chandrakirti is talking about great compassion as having these special qualities. Then text continues, it is not that compassion is praised at some later point in the text, right? This is the very beginning of the text, the very first verse, when it talked about, homage to great compassion. It is praised here itself by simply showing how it is important in the beginning, as well as at the end, and in the middle, when it comes to producing the fruit of a conqueror. So great compassion is not something that you leave behind. You just used it to develop bodhicitta, and then you can leave it behind. Don't worry about it. You need to have it in the middle, because in recognizing the suffering of other sentient beings impels you to keep practicing. And at the end, as a Buddha, it's important because that's what compels the Buddha to work for the sake of sentient beings. We get more information about it as it goes along. The exclusionary modifier alone, when it said compassion alone, right, indicates that unlike the analogy of an external crop, where what is crucial in the beginning is different than what is crucial in the middle and what is crucial at the end, right? What is crucial at the beginning is the seed. What is crucial in the middle is the water. What is crucial at the end is the fruit. Here, all three of them, we say mercy alone or compassion alone is crucial at all 3 points. So it says alone indicates that unlike the analogy of an external crop, where what is crucial in the beginning, at the end, and in the middle are different, in the context here, compassion alone is crucial for the crop of a conqueror at the beginning and at the end, as well as in the middle. That's pretty clear, right? What do you think? Okay. So fingers. Okay. Mikhail, does it make sense? Okay. Not hard. Here, so by the way, when it says mercy, well, it doesn't, Thupten Jinpa's commentary says, as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of perfect harvest in that first verse. The actual word is tsewa in Tibetan, which is usually we translate as mercy, like Jeffrey Hopkins translates that verse. Mercy alone is seen as the seed of a conqueror's rich harvest, as water for development, and as ripening in a state of long enjoyment. Therefore, at the start, I praise compassion. So mercy is a synonym here of compassion, but it's the word compassion is not as Thupten Jinpa translated there. You know the mantra of Lama Tsongkhapa? Who can I ask? Oh, Snehi, do you know the mantra of Lama Tsongkhapa?
I knew it, but when you asked, like the words have flown out of my head, and the only word I remember is Migme Sewe, something, something.
Mikme Sewe Te Chen Chen Rezi. So the first line, Mikme, when we will be coming up when we talk about the three kinds of compassion: compassion observing sentient beings alone, mere sentient beings; compassion observing phenomena, which means sentient beings qualified by being impermanent or empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent; and non-referential compassion, which is a compassion which is still is referring to sentient beings qualified by being empty of inherent existence. So in that mantra that is famous, Lama Tsongkhapa's mantra, Migme Sewe Ter Chen Chen Rezi. Ter Chen Chen Rezi means the great treasure. Ter Chen, we say Migme Sewe. Migme means non-referential. That means the kind of compassion that is realizing, that is observing sentient beings qualified by being empty of inherent existence. Sewa in that verse is what we're talking about here in Chandrakirti's verse, mercy. So it's a synonym of compassion. So we say Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezi, who are the great treasure of non-referential compassion. So that's sort of praising him that way. So,
Venerable,
yes.
could you mention that Migme understood Sewe? What was the what did it mean you said?
Sewe is like genitive case. Sewa means mercy. It's a synonym of compassion, but it's not the word compassion. It's sort of indicated there in the way that Thupten Jinpa translates it. In the verse, he says, "As compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood." It actually, in the text, in Chandrakirti's text, he's actually saying, "As mercy alone," which is synonym of compassion. So maybe that's okay. Where's Paul? There he is. Paul, what's the Sanskrit for sewa? Do you know?
Oh, I could probably find it real quick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I don't remember off the top.
I
Usually,
Karuna.
karuna is compassion, right?
Right.
That's in
Daya,
Tibetan.
Daya, maybe.
Wait, Paul will find. So generally, you can use different synonyms, but to be sort of authentic in the text, to see the variation of what Chandrakirti was saying, he said mercy at the beginning here rather than compassion itself.
Kripa, I think. Kripa.
Kripa, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, that's another word. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, sort of like scholarly points. Okay. So Chandrakirti praises compassion as opposed to Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are the other two causes at the start of the composing the treatise. The exclusionary modifier alone indicates that, unlike the analogy of the external crop, where there's different things that are important, the seed is important at the beginning, the water is important at the middle, and the fruit is important at the end. Here, compassion is that it alone is important in those three times in the development of a Buddha. Here is how the seed, compassion, is crucial at the beginning. Those with great compassion feel pain at the suffering of other sentient beings. So to help protect all suffering-ridden sentient beings, they generate the mind directed toward their welfare, the welfare of sentient beings, and contemplate, I will rescue all these sentient beings from suffering and definitely join them to Buddhahood. I'm going to have to take a break for a second. 1 second. Sorry about that. Last week, I can't remember who it was. I think Kristen was asking about the vows, or maybe I was mentioning that Kristen could take the vows like Drondempa, which had the vow of celibacy also. So I checked up. That's considered to be one of the lay vow variations when you take that. But the reason I mention that right now is that in looking up the translation of Lama Tsongkhapa's famous text called Ocean of Vinaya, this is a short prayer. When they talk about the vow of celibacy, the English translator chose incontinence. And so that was why I had, because I'm experience incontinence, but not in the sense of not being celibate, but because of my prostate radiation treatment. So I have to occasionally disappear for a second. So anyway, those with great compassion feel pain at the suffering of other sentient beings. Hopkins takes it in order to protect all suffering sentient beings pained by misery, but essentially means the same thing. So great compassion feels uncomfortable, feels suffering at the suffering of other sentient beings. Ordinarily, we don't do that, right? If we see other people suffering, it's only those that we like that we find that their suffering is uncomfortable. If our political enemy or our enemies are suffering, sometimes we feel joy. So those with great compassion feel pain at the suffering of other sentient beings. So in order to protect them, to help protect all suffering-ridden sentient beings, they generate the mind directed toward their welfare and contemplate, I will rescue all these sentient beings from suffering and definitely join them to Buddhahood. So I think I asked last time also, when we talk about compassion as the cause of bodhicitta, why don't we also talk about love as being the cause of bodhicitta? Love would be the desire that sentient beings be conjoined with happiness. So here it's talking about both. I will rescue all these sentient beings from suffering, that's compassion, and definitely join them to Buddhahood, which oftentimes we find in the prayers that we have at the beginning of our various practices. There's two things. I'm going to rescue sentient beings from suffering and set them into full enlightenment, or set them into stable happiness, everlasting happiness. So those two are coincident. When you have great compassion, you also have great love. It's not as though you have to generate great love separately. They are the same entity. They just depend on whether you're observing sentient beings suffering or whether you're observing sentient beings being devoid of happiness. If you see a little child that's crying because their mommy, they've lost their mommy in the shopping mall, you might have compassion for them. And as you recognize that they are unhappy, you might, unless the police arrest you for offering them a lollipop, you might try to do something to make them happy, right? So I will rescue all these sentient beings from suffering and definitely join them to Buddhahood. I don't know why Thupten Jinpa says to the Buddhahood. Seeing that this is dependent on attaining Buddhahood themselves for oneself, seeing that the ability to free sentient beings from suffering, all sentient beings, and conjoin them with happiness of Buddhahood, depends on oneself becoming a Buddha, because without becoming a Buddha, you can give some advice, but you don't know what the right teachings are. You don't know their states of mind and so forth. You don't know all the stages of the path until you get to the state of Buddhahood. So seeing that this is dependent on attaining Buddhahood for oneself, they generate the mind focused on awakening with the thought, I will, by all possible means, attain Buddhahood for the sake of these beings. By all possible means. In Tibetan, we say chine kyang, which comes in a lot of different prayers. Jeffrey takes it, for their sake, I will definitely attain highest enlightenment. Shimpa says, by all possible means. What it kind of means, the implication of that chine kyang in Tibetan, what it means is, whatever it takes, I'm going to go all out. I'm going to practice the bodhisattva deeds, whatever needs to be done. I'll give my body, I'll give my wealth, I'll give my merits, I'll be patient and so forth, whatever it takes, by all possible means, I will attain Buddhahood for the sake of these beings. Recognizing that such a pledge cannot be fulfilled if one forsakes the altruistic deeds, right? You can't achieve enlightenment simply by wishing to become enlightened and just hoping that it happens, like like someone else will give it to you or something. You have to practice the bodhisattva's activities, the perfection of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, concentration, wisdom, and so forth. Seeing that this is dependent on its, recognizing that such a pledge cannot be fulfilled if one forsakes the altruistic deeds, including non-dual wisdom, perfection of generosity, and so on, they definitely engage in the practice of all the deeds, including, especially including the cultivation of gnosis, wisdom, right? The actual Tibetan says, as Jeffrey's translation says, how does he translate it? Buddhahood cannot be, that promise cannot be fulfilled if the practices of giving and so forth illustrated by non-dualistic wisdom. So what that means is when he talks about the three causes, great compassion, non-dual awareness, which means the wisdom of emptiness, and bodhicitta, the non-dual awareness kind of also indicates, by the way, also other bodhisattva activities. Did Amy, did you have a question?
Before, what struck me was the word mercy.
Right.
And it's been reverberating in my head, and it's such an active word in terms of, in comparison to compassion. Mercy seems to be about action, and compassion seems to, for me, be about both an an awareness and an understanding and action. And so hearing the mercy part, it just kind of exaggerated the need for action to me. So I found that very interesting.
So so sometimes different words resonate with us in different ways. Like when in the Catholics, they go to confession, Buddhist confession is not like confessing to someone else and asking them forgiveness. It has a different meaning. So here, when we talk about being merciful, that in a certain sense, that seems to imply going out of your way to do something about it. Compassion might sound, if we understand it from other contexts, might just sound like, oh, I feel compassion for them, but that's their lot or something. Here, great compassion goes beyond that. It actually wants to, as the word mercy is a synonym of it, wants to do something about it. So that's a good point. Therefore, great compassion is the seed of all the attributes of a Buddha. With this understanding, the precious garland, the Ratnavali, Rinchen Tengwa in Tibetan, one of the texts that Nagarjuna wrote, separate from his fundamental wisdom. In that text, that's a text that Chandrakirti quotes very much to supplement when we talk about, this is Madhyamaka avatara, entering or supplementing the middle way. He supplements the teachings that Nagarjuna gave in his fundamental wisdom by other teachings that Nagarjuna gave, and of course other sutras, the Ten Bhumi Sutra and so forth. Here there's a quotation from the precious garland. In the scriptures of the great vehicle, in the Mahayana scriptures, in which are taught all the practices, stainless wisdom and so on, preceded by compassion, what sane person would deride, criticize such teachings? Jeffrey translates that as, who having intelligence, whereas Thupten says, what sane person? Who having intelligence would deride the Mahayana, in which are explained the deeds and stainless wisdom preceded by compassion. So this is just giving other evidence why Chandrakirti praises great compassion at the beginning. The stanza above states how all the essential points of the Mahayana are encompassed within the three practices. Well, you say three practices, I don't say the three practices. Awakening mind, preceded by compassion, the bodhisattva deeds in general, which are brought about by awakening mind, and in particular, the practice of wisdom, free from the stain of objectification in terms of extremes. So I think Thupten Jinpa got this a little bit wrong. Jeffrey Hopkins' translation is a little bit better, because when we talk about the three practices, we're talking about great compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta, right? It sounds like in the way they put the numbering in Thupten Jinpa's translation, 2 is the bodhisattva deeds in general that are brought forth by the awakening mind. Jeffrey Hopkins translates this as, Nagarjuna says that all the meanings of the Mahayana are contained within the three general practices induced by the altruistic mind, that's the first practice, the altruistic mind of enlightenment, preceded by compassion, meaning great compassion, and the particular practice of wisdom free from the stains of conceiving the two extremes. So it's not as though the three practices are any different than what we talked about before. In the enumeration in Thupten Jinpa's translation here, 2 sounds like the three practices are, one practice is bodhicitta preceded by great compassion, then bodhisattva deeds in general, and then the wisdom of emptiness. That's not what's meant here. It's the same three practices: great compassion that precedes bodhicitta, bodhicitta itself, and the non-dual awareness. Here is how compassion, which is like water, is also crucial in the middle. Even if the seed of compassion produces the sprout of awakening mind in the beginning, okay, compassion is like the seed at the beginning, produces the sprout of awakening in the beginning, it is not, if it is not repeatedly moistened with the water of compassion later on, one will fail to gather the vast twofold collections that are the cause of the fruit of Buddhahood. One will definitely actualize the nirvana of either a Shravaka or a Pratika Buddha instead. If, however, it is repeatedly moistened with the water of compassion, one will not end up in that situation. Richard, what do you think? Does that make sense? Richard Einhorn?
Yes, I think it does. I don't see any. I think that as you continue on the path, he's saying that you need to keep in mind compassion, and you need to practice compassion along the line in order to keep yourself focused on the path. In order to, I think that's what's meant by moistured.
Okay, so I'll ask you. So that means that once you've developed bodhicitta, if you don't moisten it with compassion, you may fall into the nirvana of a hearer or a solitary realizer. Is that right?
I think that's what he's saying, except he says not may, but definitely.
Yeah,
definitely actualize.
Yeah.
So in other words, I think he's trying to exhort us to maintain, to consistently focus on compassion and develop compassion at all stages of the path.
Right. So, so bodhisattva on the path of preparation, if they don't practice compassion, they might give up the Mahayana and enter into the Hinayana path and become a Shravaka or Pratika Buddha Arhat, or it says definitely.
That's how I'm reading it. Is that not accurate?
Well, that seems to be the way that he's translated it here. Let me ask you, can you once you've developed bodhicitta, can you fall from that realization and enter the Hinayana path? Stephen, what do you think? You're nodding yes.
Yes, you definitely can.
Oh, Donnie, okay.
Yes, what Donnie said.
You can't use her. I asked Stephen. You can't use Donnie having answered as your source.
Go, Daddy.
Love you, Stephen.
I love you too, Stephen. Stephen, so how can someone who's developed bodhicitta, who's a bodhisattva, how can they fall from the Mahayana path?
Well, I think it can happen in the path of accumulation, but not in the path of preparation. And I think what happens is basically they fail to uphold their bodhisattva vow.
Right. Well, they give up. They can give up compassion, but only at the very beginning of the path of accumulation. I think once they achieve the middling level of the path of accumulation, their bodhicitta becomes what's called gold-like. Those of you who are studying with Venerable Sangye Khandro, and we'll be studying the Abhisamaya Alamkara, in the Abhisamaya Alamkara, they talk about 22, is it 22 or 21? 22 types of bodhicitta, earth-like, gold-like, and so forth, going up in various levels. Once they achieve the gold-like bodhicitta, what is gold? The reason it's called gold-like is like gold is immutable. Even if you make an ornament out of gold, you make it into a bracelet, if you melt it, you have gold again, right? Sort of immutable. It doesn't tarnish. I mean, there can be some tarnish to gold, but generally it's least reactive with oxygen and so forth. So it's said to be immutable. So upon reaching that state, just at the very beginning, the second part of the path of accumulation, one no longer can fall. So it almost sounds like he's saying, if it's not repeatedly moistened with the water of compassion later on, one will fail to gather the vast twofold collections that are the cause for Buddhahood. So what's that? It's a little bit like saying, like what the Buddhas encourage the bodhisattvas on the three pure bhumis, when there's the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, they remind them not to remain in meditative equipoise on emptiness all the time, but they have to exit from that and accumulate the collections in order to achieve Buddhahood. It's not as though they would remain in the meditative equipoise on emptiness all the time. But by encouraging them not to do that, the bodhisattvas are more reluctant just to remain in solitary, that kind of peace of meditation on emptiness. Here it's not as though the bodhisattvas beyond that initial point on the path of accumulation could enter into the Hinayana. It just doesn't happen. There are some examples, like, you know who Shariputra is or was? I can say was.
Of course.
Who said that? Donnie. Oh, okay, good. Okay, Donnie's Donnie's happy to give answers to. Shariputra was a bodhisattva or a Shravaka at the time of the Buddha. Who knows? Sheila, what was Shariputra? Was he a bodhisattva or a Shravaka? You have to unmute.
A bodhisattva?
No. Shariputra was the foremost Shravaka in wisdom, right? He's the interrogator of Avalokiteshvara in the Heart Sutra. So he's the one that's saying, how did the bodhisattvas practice the perfection of wisdom? He was the foremost in wisdom of the Hinayana teachings. He was a Shravaka. So there's a very famous verse in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara by Shantideva that says, only the omniscient mind can understand how someone who gives up bodhicitta could ever find happiness again in the future. You're familiar with that verse, anyone? Nadine, do you know that one?
Yes, I remember this verse.
So
Happy birthday, dear Venerable.
So what is that verse? What is that verse referring to?
Shariputra had taken the Bodhisattva vow, and later I don't know what happened, but he gave it up, and still he achieved still great realizations.
Right. Still, many lifetimes later, he suffered as a result of giving up the Bodhisattva vow, giving up his bodhicitta. Many lifetimes later, he entered the path, became Shravaka, the foremost in wisdom of the Buddha. So Shantideva is referring to Shariputra, who was on the first part of the path of accumulation of the Bodhisattva, when a Mara came to test him, some evil being, and said, listen, can you give me your right hand? I need for a ritual. Something like this. And Shariputra thought, for the sake of myself, I've never given my body before. I'm going to give, now I'm aiming for enlightenment. I'll give my right hand. So he cut off his right hand and he handed it to the Mara, who looked affronted and said, why are you giving it to me with your left hand? Because his right hand was gone now, right? And left hand is considered to be the hand that you wash your underside with after going to the toilet. You never, in Indian, even Tibetans, you never give something with your left hand. You always hold with your right hand, so that the Mara took the aspect of being offended and said, how dare you? I'm not going to take this. And he smashed the hand. And Shariputra thought, oh my gosh, if sentient beings are like this, how can I work for their benefit? And at that point, because he had not reached the gold-like bodhicitta, he had not reached the middling level of the path of accumulation, his bodhicitta diminished and he left that path. So Shantideva is referring to that incident, that only the omniscient mind could understand how someone, having given up bodhicitta, could ever find happiness in the future, that, eventually they could. So even if the seed of compassion produces the sprout of awakening mind in the beginning, if it is not repeatedly moistened with the water of compassion later on, one will fail to gather the vast two collections that are the cause for the fruit of Buddhahood. One will definitely actualize the nirvana of either a Shravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha instead. So that can indicate either talking about the situation like Shariputra, who had not yet reached that stable state, or it could be talking about just theoretically, if let's say, if pigs could fly, so it's something that doesn't happen, but if that were to happen, they would actualize the state of a Shravaka or Pratika Buddha. If, however, it is repeatedly moistened with the water of compassion, one will not end up in that situation. I'm going to have to take another break. 1 second. Sorry. Okay. So it's kind of talking about a theoretical. If they didn't moisten it in the middle, they would fall to that. But the bodhisattvas always have great compassion. After after they've developed bodhicitta, after they've achieved the middling level of the path of accumulation, they no longer can lose that bodhicitta or that great compassion. Then how it's like the ripened fruit. Compassion is also crucial at the end. How, like the ripened fruit, compassion is crucial at the end. Even if one attains the conqueror's state, remember conqueror, Jina in Sanskrit, is epithet for the Buddha, someone who's conquered the delusions. Even if one attains the state of Buddhahood, if one lacks the ripened fruit of compassion, one will not become a resource that sustains other sentient beings. Well, we're talking about someone who's already achieved the path of no more learning, who's become Buddha. Could a Buddha lack compassion? No, but this is just talking, again, like if pigs could fly. If they didn't have compassion, the proliferation of the uninterrupted lineages of the Arya Shravakas, Arya Pratika Buddhas, and the Arya Bodhisattvas, one following another in a continuous lineage, will also not come about. What's that talking about? Mary Ellen, do you have an idea what that's talking about? No, okay. All right. Who can I ask? Violet, do you have an idea? Oh, okay. Oh, come on. Tendran, Venerable. You have to unmute.
I think it's just saying that then really Buddhahood would not be possible. And so the Pratyeka Buddhas and the Shravakas, since the cause of them are the Buddhas, then they also would not exist. And if great compassion is there, the bodhisattvas wouldn't come about.
Right. Well, here they're talking about the hearers and solitary realizers are born from the Buddhas, right? The Buddhas give the teachings to them out of compassion. So if they didn't have compassion, there wouldn't be the sort of continuation of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddha Aryas, those who've realized emptiness, because they wouldn't have heard it from the Buddha. And the Bodhisattvas themselves, this is talking about the compassion in the mind of the Buddha. So it's not talking about the compassion that's the cause of the Bodhisattva. It's talking about it. Also, the Bodhisattvas would not be receive teachings on the bodhisattva path and so forth if compassion was devoid in the mind of the Buddha. But again, this is talking about this hypothetical situation. The Buddhas always have great compassion. I like, again, that paragraph. I like Jeffrey's translation a little bit better. Also, the collection of hearers, solitary and bodhisattva aryas, the word arya just comes once, superiors, arising from the transmission of the Buddha's word from one to the other would not increase uninterruptedly. So that's more or less the same if you understand. The text continues, if compassion is perpetually present on the resultant ground, only the contrary situation will come about. And of course, it is perpetually, great compassion is perpetually present on the resultant ground. What does resultant ground mean? Do you know, Ron, what that means, resultant ground?
No, I don't.
So we call the causal grounds and the resultant ground. The causal grounds are are bhumis, the first bhumi where you realize emptiness directly, second, third, fourth, up till the 10th bhumi. Those are called causal grounds. Resultant ground is the state of Buddhahood, sort of like the path of no more learning. Sort of like in Tantra when we talk about, what do we talk about? You know, or even in Sutra, we talk about the causal refuge and resultant refuge. Do you know the difference between those, Ron? Causal refuge and resultant refuge?
Not at first glance, no.
Not at first here, not at first glance. So causal refuge means when you take refuge in external beings like the Buddha, the Dharma, Sangha. Resultant refuge is when you take refuge in your eventual achievement of enlightenment. You know, you think, I have the Buddha nature, I'm going to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. So when you take refuge on that account, that's called resultant refuge. You take refuge in the fact that you will eventually become Buddha. So if compassion is perpetually present at on the resultant ground, when you become Buddha, only the contrary situation will come about, meaning that there will be the proliferation, there will be the continuation of the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattva superiors. Therefore, through explicating the meaning of these 4 lines that begin, as compassion alone is accepted to be, right? What was that? As compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment, I will praise compassion at the start. So those 4 lines, through explicating the meaning of those 4 lines, we should gain a firm conviction that these lines demonstrate the following. If I aspire to follow the Mahayana, the great vehicle, I must first become moved by the power of compassion. And on that basis, I must then generate the awakening mind from the depth of my heart. Having generated bodhicitta, such a mind, I must without doubt engage in the bodhisattva deeds in general, and in particular penetrate the depth of the profound view of emptiness. In this way, I must train in these. So if you trace back, you want to achieve enlightenment, you realize that to achieve enlightenment, you have to have bodhicitta. in order to have bodhicitta, if you're a practitioner of sharp faculties, you need to have realized emptiness beforehand in order to practice exchange of self and others. If in order to have the motivation to achieve that realization, you have to have great compassion. So even great compassion, sort of like it's the initial cause of the other two. And if you have difficulty making realization of emptiness, non-dual awareness, if you have difficulty generating bodhicitta, go back to the cause. Maybe you don't yet have great compassion. And if you don't have great compassion, you have to look at what its causes are, which we'll be talking about in a minute. So causes of great compassion are, first of all, recognizing the suffering nature of other beings, how they're suffering, which you have to first realize by developing renunciation for yourself. You know, if you don't have renunciation of cyclic existence, if you think that having a big yacht and millions of dollars and 3 million Twitter followers is not suffering, you're not going to be able to feel compassion for other sentient beings that are experiencing those. And in order to develop that great compassion, you also need to have affectionate love for them, affection for them, by either recognizing that they've been your mother in numberless lives in the past, or through the methods of equalizing and exchanging self and others, when you recognize how they're beneficial even when they harm you, and so forth. So that's coming up. Ida, you have a question with Avalokiteshvara.
Yes, actually, I just wanted to add that without affectionate love for sentient beings, if you see their suffering, you won't develop compassion or great compassion. So heartwarming love is a precursor to all this.
Yes.
That's
So in
what
the
I wanted to add.
Yeah, good point. So in the 7 factors of cause and effect, affectionate love comes before great compassion. It's not full-fledged love. It's just a sense of when you see other sentient beings, you have a heartwarming feeling in your mind, like Atisha, when he looked out the window of his hermitage in Tibet. There's a famous story when he saw the cows out in the pasture. He could be heard muttering, mother, sentient beings, mother, recognizing their kindness and so forth. Even in their present state, they can't provide much more than milk. Snehi, you have a thought?
Oh, I just had a question, Venerable George, just to make sure I understood what you said a little bit earlier, where you were talking about generating bodhicitta, and you said, I think you said, for some people, they need to have the realization of emptiness in order to do the exchange of self with other.
Yes.
So in order to generate bodhicitta, you can do it without a realization of emptiness, just by going through the 7 cause and effect, like doing that kind of analysis, or you can have a realization of emptiness and that develops bodhicitta.
And not develop bodhicitta?
And develop bodhicitta.
And develop, so like one way you could say, those who are followers of faith, who do not have sharp faculties, do not necessarily have to develop a realization of emptiness in order to generate bodhicitta, but it takes a long, long time. And even at the end of that, almost they have to have some insight into emptiness to see that it's possible to achieve enlightenment. For them, to vow that I will attain enlightenment presupposes that you have an understanding that it's possible to become enlightened. So even the practitioners of dull faculties, followers of faith, they practice the 7 methods. At some point near the end, before they develop, say, the exceptional thought, they probably have some insight into emptiness. but it's not, it doesn't allow them to practice the equalizing and exchanging self and others like the practitioners of sharp faculties, who are called followers of reasoning. They realize emptiness first, then on the basis of that, realizing that I can identify with the entirety of sentient beings because there's no inherently existent self. I'm only labeling self under these aggregates because of sort of familiarity. I could label self onto the entirety of sentient beings. Then by recognizing the defects of self-cherishing, the advantages of cherishing others, that it accumulates so much virtue, they're able to develop bodhicitta more quickly by that method. So maybe both, even the practitioner of dull faculties, even though the text doesn't state it explicitly here, probably near the end, before they develop exceptional thought, probably have some insight into emptiness. But I don't know. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you. But Venerable George, I've always wondered, like, even the very first step of the 7-point cause and effect, like just equanimity, like,
Right.
is it really possible to develop even that equanimity without some understanding of emptiness or realization of
No, so
emptiness?
that equanimity doesn't have anything to do with emptiness. So essentially, that's not one of the 7 factors of cause and effect. That comes, so even to start on this quest, one needs to meditate on equanimity. This equanimity that's talked about there is not talking about it's not talking about emptiness. It's talking about that sentient beings are equal in having been friend, enemy, and stranger. Okay. On the basis of that, you can start to warm up your affection. The analogy that's given in the sutras is like in the desert, before dawn, everything is equally cold. In the high desert. I don't know if you know that. Shankar knows that in the desert. As the sun begins to rise, it begins to heat up the ground equally. And at the top, at the zenith, at noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun's very hot, everything has warmed up. If you try to develop affection for sentient beings without equanimity, you will have a false sense of affection for friends because they're easy to feel affection for. And you won't necessarily be able to develop affection for strangers or enemies that easily. So it's said that to recognize through the meditation on equanimity as a prelude to the 7 causes and effect, or as a prelude to equalizing exchange of self and others, you can overcome that pitfall, that obstacle. You'll be able to develop affection for all sentient beings, having recognized even the present enemy has been your friend and mother in the past, and the stranger has been equally friend, enemy, and stranger, and so forth. Okay. I can't remember who asked that question. Was that Snee? Sean, you have a question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm still getting caught up here. So like last time you mentioned something about the continuum of the Buddha being a different mental continuum from our own, because we'll achieve our own Buddha nature. And
our
so
own Buddhahood, yeah, right. And
then you're talking about emptiness showing you there's no self, but then you can by understanding emptiness, you can exchange self for others to expand. I mean,
when you realize emptiness, you don't realize that there's no self. There is a self. There is a Sean, conventional Sean, that is labeled upon his aggregates. But the bodhisattva who is aiming to develop bodhicitta through equalizing and exchanging self and others. One of the wisdoms, one of the things that can help them to be able to do that. What does that mean? Equalizing and exchanging self and others. What it means is equalizing your concern for others equal to your concern for yourself.
Sure.
Okay, that's what it means. And so
but you're also talking about re-identifying, instead of identifying myself here, I'm identifying it with all other sentient beings.
You
so that
can, yes, you can. You can, just like right now, you might say that, the left hand has a thorn, or let's say the left foot has a thorn, and you might say, why should my right hand take out that thorn from my left foot? It has nothing to do with me.
right,
The
which
right
I think
hand, But if you think in a broader sense, you're all part of one, grand sentient being. Like say, when you think of the entirety of sentient beings, you are just one limb of them. You can re-identify. You can. It's not. You're not inherently Sean Chafin. You are just nominative. You're just imputed upon that because of your familiarity with your physical aggregates and your mental aggregates. None of them are really you. You inherited the continuity of your form aggregate from the egg and sperm that came from your mother and father, and all of the Big Macs and chocolate shakes and pizzas you ate over the years contributed to your body aggregate. Maybe you're more organic, maybe all the tofu and other things, spinach that you ate, all of those. Why should you identify that with me, with I? It's not inherently you. It's just conventionally you, and by convention, by consensus, that's called you. But opening up your mind to emptiness, you realize you could identify with the entirety of sentient beings because you're exactly equal with them in wanting to be happy and wanting to be free of suffering and so forth. Okay, think about it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just read another paragraph here, and then we're going to end. Therefore, through explicating the meaning of these 4 lines that begin, as compassion alone is accepted to be, and so forth, we should gain a firm conviction that these lines demonstrate the following. If I aspire to follow the great vehicle, the Mahayana, I must first become moved by the power of compassion. And on that basis, I must then generate bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, awakening mind from the depth of my heart. Having generated such a mind, I must without doubt engage in the bodhisattva's deeds. In general, and in particular, penetrate the depth of the profound view of emptiness. In this way, I must train in these. So we'll begin here next time. The next section says, paying homage to great compassion by differentiating its characteristics. So there are 2 sections. Paying homage to compassion that takes sentient beings as its object, mere sentient beings, and paying homage to compassion that takes phenomena and the non-referential as its object. Here Thupten Chimpa says phenomenal reality. The Tibetan just says phenomena. And so that's what that means is you, beyond just recognizing that sentient beings are suffering, just mere sentient beings, that they're suffering, you recognize the sentient beings that are suffering in the sense that they are impermanent. They're changing moment by moment. When we talk about subtle impermanence, recognizing that, having sentient beings qualified by being impermanent, that most people don't recognize, right? Most people have what's called permanent grasping. we believe that we, maybe in the end, that you're going to die, but we somehow we have this feeling that I am the same as I was 5 minutes ago. I'm the same as I was before, and I will be the same later. So recognizing sentient beings with that kind of quality, you have a greater compassion for them. And recognizing sentient beings as suffering, sentient beings who are empty of inherent existence. That's what's called, like in the mantra of Lama Khapa, Migme Sewe Te Chen Chen Rezi, non-referential compassion. So that means you're observing sentient beings still as suffering, but the sentient beings are qualified by being empty of inherent existence. That allows you to be much more calm and sage in your compassion. You don't get upset, like, what do we call it? Idiot compassion. Have you heard that expression, idiot compassion? Sort of like, oh my God, my dog is suffering. I don't know what I'm going to do. Recognizing that your dog is impermanent. It's going to eventually die. Recognizing that your dog is empty of inherent existence and its sufferings don't inherently exist and so forth, allow you a certain coolness of mind, not to, fall prey to idiot compassion. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about next time. So the first section is paying homage to compassion that takes sentient beings as its object, takes mere sentient beings as its object. And that starts out, the verse from the third verse from Chandrakirti's text says, first with the thought, I, Tibetan says, I am. It's first with the grasping to I, they cling to a self. Then with the thought of mine, M-I-N-E, right? They become attached to things, my computer, my car, my body, my money. Like buckets on a water wheel, they turn without control. I bow to the compassion that cares for such suffering beings. So this is the next section that we're going to be talking about next time. Compassion referring to mere sentient beings. So before we do dedication, anyone have any further questions? Rachel.
So when I was reading this, I wondered if this was anything to do, and it doesn't say it so far as I've gotten so far, anything to do with the view of the transitory collection. Is this is basically the same as the view of the transitory collection? Is that
the
correct?
First compassion?
This I and mine, that's being referenced here.
Right.
Is this the same? Would I be right in assuming that this is part of that same idea of the view of transitory collection?
You are right in your assumption. You have a correct assumption. You're leaning, yeah. So generally, the view of the transitory collection, which Thupten Jinpa translates here is identity view. In Tibetan, it's jiksok la tawa. And sok means collection, jik means transitory or impermanent, changing. So that's one reason that's often called the view of the transitory collection. What that is a basic kind of ignorance that is the root of samsara. Well, it's also the ignorance that grasps to the inherent existence of other things is also called the root of samsara. So there's a debate about which of those is actually the root. So what it means is like when we talked about in our course practice of emptiness earlier. So there is an appearance to your mind always of some inherently existent self. What you're actually referring to is your conventional self, the merely imputed Rachel. But our mind, that conventionally existent self appears to your mind as though it's inherently existent, and you grasp to it, you believe to it, you adhere to that appearance, you believe it. That's called I grasping, or grasping to the self of oneself. That's the basic kind of view of the transitory collection. As a result of that, immediately, as a result of that, things that are that you imagine as your possessions, your body, your car, your computer, whatever, there is those things that you think of as mine, M-I-N-E, right? The view of the transitory collection grasping to mine doesn't mean grasping to your computer, grasping to your hand or whatever. It means the state of mind, M-I-N-D, which is believing that there is an inherently existent mine, M-I-N-E. So we'll talk about that next time. So that is indeed, your assumption is correct. That's how the text is going to be going on. How are we doing? Okay. I haven't heard from some people. Janice, do you have any questions? Dwana?
I'm sure I have questions, but I'm following along as best I can. And I'm proud of myself for knowing some of the answers to the questions that you're asking.
I am proud of you too. Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Don, how are you doing? You have any question?
Oh, thank you, George. I'm doing well listening to you teaching.
Okay. Okay. I think I've asked, I'll ask Diana if she has any question. She doesn't want me to ask, to cold question her.
Don't have a question, but I have a thought about the application in my life to the teaching about Shariputra and the Mara, which is that speaking for myself, but also the kinds of people I know and admire, most of us are not at the level of being in non-dharma, are at the level of being dedicated to the welfare of others, but there's a prevalent idea that there's something called justified anger, and
Right.
that justified anger is actually valuable. I know many people who say you cannot continue to work on behalf of others without it. Excuse me. And so I've just been thinking about that and thinking about this being one of the major branching points between the idea of what it means to live your life in a good way, between being a Dharma practitioner and not.
I'm still here, even though my picture is off.
And also that there's always the example of His Holiness, who no longer, according to somebody who was his personal attendant, no longer feels anger about what has been done and is being done to the Tibetan people. And so if that is not a cause of anger, then nothing can be. Nothing small in my life could be.
Right.
Nothing I do on behalf of others could be.
Right. So this is a, 1 second, get back here. So generally, what one has to recognize what anger is. Anger is a state of mind which is called a klesha in Tibetan. In Tibetan we say nyonmong, right? It's you can say disturbing state of mind, you can call it emotion, or you can call it delusion, whatever you want to call it. It is a state of mind which causes the rest of your mind, so it's being present in your mind, it causes the rest of your mind to become unstable. You're not able, and like the example of the horses of the king's army, running through the river, they cause the surface of the water to become disturbed, and they cause the mud in the bottom of the river to come up, so the river is no longer lucid. So in the same way, when delusions are present, they cause the mind to become agitated, and they cause your mind to become unclear, like the mud coming up into it, so you can't make decisions well. So in general, we would say anger is never never a good thing. There's no such thing as righteous anger. What you can develop is, like the bodhisattvas, see injustice and feel compassion for the sentient beings that are being unjustly persecuted or harmed in some way by political decisions or something. And as a result of that, your mind, it's not anger, your mind finds the energy to try to bring an end to that injustice. So from a Buddhist perspective, there's nothing called righteous anger. You can, if you can find that degree of indignation, that people are being harmed in some way, and that can encourage you to action to try to right that. Also, you might express that, but your mind is not angry. You may express it that way to others who are moved by that expression, but your mind is actually peaceful. So the Dalai Lama, I think, the Dalai Lama has no anger. He used to say when he was a young boy, he would sometimes get angry when things would happen, but through his practice, he was able to overcome that. So when you see things that you don't like, when we talk about the generation of anger, right? Anger arises because you experience something that's uncomfortable, right? Unpleasant, either pain or some kind of nuisance to you. The people at the airport don't tell you what the plane schedule is or whatever people get angry about, and then you exaggerate that situation. You think it's permanent. It has nothing for you. It's no benefit for you. That it's inherently existent. That it has it will remain and so forth. By exaggerating in those means that are what are called inappropriate attention, your mind then finds the situation as unbearable and falls into that situation where the mind is agitated and unclear, and you can't make decisions rationally. You can't actually find the best way to bring about a resolution of the situation because your mind is agitated. You can't develop wisdom. There's obscurations in your mind. If, however, you can overcome the anger and still recognize the situation is something that is unjust and intolerable by others, maybe even intolerable for yourself. You can't intolerable may be the wrong word, because intolerable sounds like anger a little bit. If you can, within that state of mind that's lacking, go on.
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable. There you go. If within that state of mind, you're moved by compassion, you can, because your mind is not under the influence of delusion, you can actually you can see more clearly. Your mind is lucid. It's not clouded by the mud of delusions coming into your mind, and it's stable and so forth. And you can become an inspiration to others that maybe don't have your equanimity, that don't have your lack of anger. You could be an inspiration to them to find solutions that are more doable, that will work, and so forth. So from a Buddhist perspective, anger is never justified. The only thing that there's this famous statement in Shantideva's text, again, this is like, if pigs could fly, if anger were ever acceptable, the only thing you could be angry at is your own self-cherishing and self-grasping. That's the real enemy. That's the thing you want to get worked up about. But again, you don't get angry at it. You find it unacceptable, as you said, or intolerable or whatever. And you work to, overcome that through developing bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness. Bodhicitta overcomes self-cherishing, this intolerable situation, and wisdom of emptiness overcomes the grasping to inherent existence of the self, and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Don't forget an instant of anger. Okay, thank you, Donnie. Some comment. So by the way, the coordinator, I can't remember who it was, could you put up again the schedule, the proposed schedule on the chat again? Because some people may have come after the last time you put it up there. Okay, so you take a look. If you have any questions, we still have class next week. Then we'll take a break the first 3 weeks of August, and we will continue the last week of August, the first week of September, which were not on Snehi's suggested list before, for 8 weeks. Then we'll take a break 1 week, and then another 8 weeks before Christmas. So if you have any questions or suggestions of a better way to do it, let me know. Otherwise, could you put up the dedication prayers? Forgot who's the director. Here we are. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that enlightened state. And the next one. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. So the first is actual dedication. The second is a prayer. The first dedicating is thinking, because of these merits that I've created today, listening to the teachings, having motivated at the beginning, may they ripen in such a way that bring about my spiritual development up to and including enlightenment, from which state I can lead all sentient beings out of suffering into that very state of bodhicitta. And then the long life prayers. You, Lama Zopa, who uphold the Munis, Shakyamuni's moral code, serving as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Lama Tsongkhapa Manjunath's victorious doctrine, masterfully accomplishing the magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. you teachers, spiritual friends who are eyes to view all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for fortunate beings traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by love. You see in the line above that, sewa kyo, moved by mercy. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. So thank you. Thanks for your patience, good questions, and sort of continue reading ahead. This section, paying homage to compassion that takes sentient beings as its object. And we'll probably finish that next time, along with possibly introducing the section paying homage to compassion that takes phenomena and takes no reference as its object. So see you then. Take care.